Continuing the story from part 2, if you haven't seen part 1, there'll be a link in the description, you can click on that, is that I had him do squats with assistance, a 4-point squat, if that makes any sense. A 4-point squat or assisted squat is that he held a TRX or a band and held it and squatted down. So he was allowed to use his upper body to help support himself as he lowered himself down. He did about 5 or 6 squats very tentatively. And the movement pattern is interesting because his hamstrings are not wanting to move. So instead of moving his hamstrings, he's shifting his body back so his quads can do more of the work. Sort of like a really bad front squat. It's almost like he's sitting into a chair but holding his body upright. That's essentially what a front squat is, with very minimal knee flexion. Now, if he wasn't getting a lot of knee flexion, why is that? Well, because of poor ankle flexibility or ankle dorsiflexion, right? So after he did about 5 or 6, he started to feel his back start to spasm and get really, really tight. So what we had to do was roll it out. It was kind of hard to assess because this is my first time working with this individual. But it was kind of cool because all my experiences in my head really started to connect with the problems that people have with pain and injury, or even my own pain and injury from years ago. It's just you connect all the dots and you're starting to see what happens to somebody when they move wrong for a really long time and they don't address the root problem. Sure, you can foam roll. Sure, you can stretch. But that doesn't solve your problem, because if you're still moving wrong, you're going to get hurt again, and you're probably not going to get worse. So his back started to spasm. We had him roll on on a foam roller, actually a PVC pipe foam roller, the Fascinator. The Fascinator is what it's called. It's one of my old co-workers, managers from 24 Hour Fitness. He has a company, Anthony Crisco, and so that's a really good roller because it's kind of thinner than a normal roller. Anyways, we rolled it out, broke up essentially the lat and some of the spinal erectors, mostly the lat though, because that thoracic lumbar fascia has a tendency to get really yucky. And when you have a back problem, that thing basically becomes sort of like its own corset and becomes very, very rigid. So what I'm seeing is that he's having trouble allowing his hamstrings and glutes to allow his hips to move. He's demonstrating a very bad external rotation of the hips. He doesn't know how to use external rotators. And if you think about the cue, if you've heard this before, screw your feet into the ground, he wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to turn his feet out. If you can imagine the femur, this is the front of the femur here, my knuckles here, and then turning the feet, this is my left, say this is the left, the femur bone, and when you activate the glutes, the femur will turn this way a little bit on both sides, creating kind of this, essentially the hole that you squat into, or the deadlift that you sit back into. And it's allowing those hamstring muscles to stretch, those glute muscles to activate, those gluteus medius and hips to stabilize the pelvis so that the spine, stabilize the pelvis so it can move and shift back, and then allow the lumbar spine and thoracic lumbar spine to stay on top of that pelvis and not make it move. Because the problem is, if you can't use those hips to tilt correctly to allow the hamstrings to engage and glutes to engage, what's going to end up happening is the lumbar has to flex in order for you to reach for the ground or squat. And if you're reaching for a deadlift, if you're squatting, you're going to get this sort of a what is it called, a butt wink. Now, he wasn't butt winking. He couldn't. He was too rigid to butt wink. But that, if I had just thinking back now, he was probably trying to. His pelvis was trying to tuck underneath, and that tucking underneath, sort of like a reverse crunch, or a leg lift, or Roman chair knee up from a squat position. His pelvis wants to rotate forward and in, causing the lower back to basically catch. And because he doesn't have that motor pattern, he doesn't know how to use it. It made it so that he had to basically his lower back freaked out. So we rolled it out, made a difference. So these are some thoughts. And so to kind of end this video in this little 2-part series is that the big part when it comes to lower back problems, lower back pain that are relatively complicated for some people out there, is that the hips, hamstrings, glutes have to be able to allow the pelvis to move so that the spine can move with it. When the hips, hamstrings, glutes, pelvis don't move correctly, what ends up happening is the spine will not be able to reach down into the position it needs to get down to, for instance, like grabbing something off the ground or squatting. So what it will do is that the lower back, the lumbar spine, will have to rotate instead, so the spine will round for the sacrifice of your pelvis not doing what it's supposed to do. So the secondary kind of off-label use of the lower back ends up being becomes the lower back, whether it be from the bottom, kind of a butt wink movement, or more of a kind of C-shape kind of rounding of the lower back. So Got to use those hips, got to use those glutes, focus on external rotation, activate the core, and there you go. Hope you got something from this video. Leave a comment below if you have a question, and I can talk more about this if you'd like me to help you out. Talk to you soon.